All right, the Iowa Hawkeyes preview and prediction video. Chris, I will start us off here talking about one of the most exciting things in the country, and that is Iowa's offense. I think I actually could see corn grow faster, and that would be more entertaining, I should say. Watching corn grow is more entertaining than watching Iowa's offense was last year. And I'm not trying to dig. Obviously, I work in Iowa, so I have nothing but respect for this program. Chris, that's a different story over there if you're looking in the backdrop of his silhouette, right?
You bet.
Look, here's the thing. Coming into last year, we said Iowa's offense couldn't get worse. Well, we were wrong. And, I mean, it was historically bad. They ranked dead last in the country as far as offense was concerned. Tim Lester was brought in to revolutionize this offense, and boy, does he have his work cut out for him. Again, Tim Lester's last year at Western Michigan. Okay, last year he was with the Green Bay Packers. The year prior to that, in 2022, they ranked dead last in the MAC in total offense. So that's the guy that's going to be tasked with getting this program back into the annals of relevancy as far as offense is concerned. Look, quarterback Cade McNamara comes back. You know, last year he was hurt. He had a season-ending injury after about 5 games. In those 5 games, you know, he put up 500 yards and 4 touchdowns. Right? It was, if you do the math on that, I mean, that's literally like 100 yards and less than a touchdown a game. So that still wasn't anything to write home about. He's been around the program for a while. I look for the run game, you know, for them to still lean on that run game and maybe try to do some things with it. Right? I mean, LaShawn Williams and Caleb Johnson are back. You know, they need the passing game, you know, for them, in my opinion, to take a step forward, right? Look, defenses were loading the box on Iowa all of last year, right? And they were keeping them in check. Even with that, they still had pretty good years with all that considered, right? The receiver room, look, it's been their biggest issue over the last few years, right? They struggle to create separation, making it harder for the quarterbacks to get rhythm, right? And vice versa. It's a whole host of things, right? They have to be able to throw the football and play competently, right? And that starts with the offensive coordinator, it starts with the quarterback, and it starts with the receivers as well. The offensive line has to be able to hold up and protect when you get in those meaningful games. The good news for this offense, Chris, is they're getting back tight end Luke Lachey, who had a ton of potential, right? He's got a ton of potential. Right? He got banged up last year as well. So I think if he can stay healthy, he's going to be probably the guy they're going to look to kind of run this offense through. Also, here's the other good thing. They get back just about all of their line from last year. I think they only have to replace like 1 starter. So that's pretty good. So they've got experience. They've got some depth. But can they put it all together? Can it mean something? And that's what we're really looking for Iowa this year. Chris, I'm going to throw it over to you. Tell me about that Hawkeyes defense.
Yeah. You know, last season, the defense was amazing. It was remarkable. And people forget, I don't think people understand just how good this defense was because they were on the field literally 80% of the time. I watched a lot of Hawkeye football games over here. Their offense set back football 100 years. I mean, it really did. It was that bad. But defensively, they only gave up 14.8 points per game. Now, I know people are going to say, well, it was the Big Ten West last year. There were a lot of piss poor offenses in the Big Ten West. Obviously, they no longer exist now with the conference being the way that it is with the addition of the new teams. But that 14.8 per game given up last year was 4th best in the country. Regardless of what you want to say or what you want to make out of it, it's pretty damn good. Christian talked about the offense returning starters. The defense returns 8 of 11 of those guys. That's huge. That's massive for Iowa. I don't expect much change there defensively. So as ugly as it was last year, the defense, you know, is on the complete other side of the spectrum here. So the pass rush as a whole, Christian, was really, really good last year. The only problem I could see, or maybe a little bit of a red flag, was they didn't get a ton of takeaways. They had 15 last season. Now, that's not absolutely terrible, but there were teams that were in the upper 20s to 30s last season. And sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. The linebacker core for Iowa will definitely be one of the best in the country again this season. It will be led by Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson. These guys recorded 281 tackles between 2 of them. That's pretty amazing, by the way. That also helps when you're on the field all the time. But no Cooper DeJean this season. We know he got drafted. He was a hell of a freaking player, hell of a punt returner. But they do get safeties back. Xavier, I do not know how to pronounce this guy's name. Nabakapa. I have no idea how to pronounce it. I don't name these people. And then Quinn Schultz will be there as well. They should be great in the secondary again. I expect more turnovers caused this season by Iowa as well. So, Christian, let's bring up the schedule here, and I'll give my record prediction. As you can see, right off the rip here, Illinois State won't be a problem. Now, they do play Iowa State, and they play this game every year, I believe. It's always like the second or third game of the season. This game is always really close for the most part in most years. I am going to give the edge to Iowa here, just strictly on they do play at home, which is awesome, and Iowa should be the better team. So you got Troy. I see that as a win, 3-0. You go on the road at Minnesota. Minnesota was one of the very few teams last season that knocked off Iowa, if everybody remembers the end of that game, that punt return that was called back and all that other shit. I see Iowa beating Minnesota for revenge this season. Then you go on the road at Ohio State. No way. That'll be Iowa's first loss of the season, in my opinion. Now you got Washington. We talked about them earlier. I think Iowa knocks off Washington. You go on the road at Michigan State. Tough place to play. Iowa's still the better team. Michigan State's pretty much had complete turnover there from the head coaches on down to the players. You got Northwestern. That game is usually close every year, but give me Iowa in that one. I do think they dropped the game of Wisconsin. I know that's at home. I talked about that earlier, though. Wisconsin should be an interesting team. This game is always very, very close as well. You go on the road, travel out to the West Coast to play UCLA. I think Iowa wins that one. UCLA is kind of like in a Michigan State type of place right now with a turnover change and everything going on with the head coach over there. Maryland, decent team last year, loses a lot of pieces. Give me Iowa in that one as well. And Nebraska. I was looking at that wrong. I hate to say this for my Huskers, but this rivalry's been very lopsided, and I hate to do this, and it pains me to say it. Give me Iowa versus Nebraska. I think Iowa wins that game. I think it just strictly because it's at home. I think it's going to be tough. So if you guys just followed my great way of breaking down these games, I got Iowa winning 10 games this year, going 10-2. Christian, tell me why I'm wrong.
Wow. Chris, I thought we were going to differ on this, and we are. I have Iowa going 9-3.
Okay.
Very similar losses, right? I literally have them. Ohio State. Again, I think Ohio State's going to be one of the best teams in the country this year. Very hard to beat them, especially on the road. So it's going to be very difficult. Wisconsin, I do think Wisconsin's going to be much more improved. Again, it's all going to depend when you're playing Wisconsin. It really depends on what version of Tyler Van Dyke you're going to be facing, right? It could very easily change. And then Nebraska. I've got Nebraska winning that game. Now, is that a misprint by Espen there, Chris? It says it's versus Nebraska, but didn't you guys play them at home last year? So this is, in fact, on the road.
It is on the road at Iowa.
Okay. Yeah, I still think on the road, the key to beating – okay, let's talk about this for a second. Let's pause it right here, if you will. The key to beating Iowa is not very difficult. Iowa has always been propped up by playing, just the last few years, by playing, frankly, a lot worse teams. We saw that last year when they played, Tennessee's second and third string, team that was held together by duct tape because everybody was either in the portal or declared for the draft, and they started literally a second and third string defense. Now I know, hey, Iowa, their offense wasn't very good last year, right? And we rib them on that as well. I don't know how much better they're going to be this year. I think they'll be better, but do I think they're going to crack the top 100? And do I think that that's really going to make a difference? Because I think Nebraska is going to be a good team. I do think Nebraska, and I'm going to ultimately, hopefully, segue this together so it makes sense. I think that Nebraska has a really good defense. They get a ton back on the defensive side of the ball. So it's going to be really hard for Iowa to move and score. They've got a true freshman quarterback in Raiola, who we'll see. Like I said, I think Raiola's going to be, he's going to be up and down this year. He's going to do some things you like. He's going to do some boneheaded things you don't like. And we'll see. I mean, like I said, the kid's going to have to stay healthy, and it's a long season to see that, right? It's not uncommon for the last game of the year for two different quarterbacks to be starting than what started the beginning of the year. But if Raiola plays in that game, if he's healthy to go, I mean, look, I'm Olivia torched them last year, and he hardly played. So I'm just saying, with backups, by the way. So it wouldn't shock me if Nebraska knocked them off, even on the road, because they did that last time they played. They beat them on the road, to kind of dampen the season for Iowa. So it was a good year for them there. Chris, let me kind of throw it over to you and ask you, what's the best and worst case for Iowa?
I think worst case, before I even give you that, this schedule is, we talked about Washington. Look at this schedule. This is a complete opposite. Iowa avoids Oregon, USC, Michigan, Penn State. They avoid a lot of the bigger name teams in the Big Ten this season. So that helps, right? So I think worst case scenario, I still see Iowa winning 7 games. I really, truly do. They should be better offensively. I know we said that last year, but they almost have to be. It can't be much worse. I think you're going to be in games with Minnesota. You should be able to be, honestly, like UCLA, Michigan State. Those teams weren't very good last year outside of UCLA. I just don't see a way that Iowa, with that defense returning 8 of 11 starters, my God, man, I don't think, Kirk Ferentz has been doing it forever. He's no dummy. That defense is going to be elite again. So worst case, I'll say maybe 6-6 or 7-5. Best case, 10 wins for Iowa is a lot. I don't think they beat Ohio State. Now, could they go 11-1? They could. There's a possibility out there with the schedule that's at hand. The only way they would have an undefeated, regular season here is if Ohio State just completely shits the bed this season, and I don't think that happens. So I do want to flip that over to you, Christian. What's your thoughts on floor and ceiling with this team?
No, I completely agree with you. I mean, on the surface, it's for the floor. Let's start there. For the floor portion of it, I mean, look, Iowa State is no easy task. Would it shock me at all if Iowa State was able to pull an upset? No, 100% it would. Then you got to go on the road. You got to play Minnesota. I do think that PJ Fleck and Minnesota, they're kind of a, they're a weird team. He's a unique guy, PJ Fleck. He is, right. So the Kalikamantis, or however the hell you say the Greek rifle's name, is gone. But I think if I remember right, they did get somebody in. We haven't covered Minnesota yet. They did get a transfer quarterback in who's pretty good. So, Minnesota's a weird team. It wouldn't shock me if something happened there. We talk about Ohio State. They're not beating Ohio State on the road. Washington, again, they're a unique team too, right? We've kind of been a little low on them if you go check out our other video that we just put out about Washington. But I don't know, Washington, to me, they travel to play Iowa. We know Iowa's a tough team to beat at home. But again, Chris, just looking at the schedule, you look at Michigan State, they've got a new coach in Jonathan Smith who did great things at Oregon State, but it's going to take them some time to get that program, going. I mean, it does help them that they're going to play Iowa at home, though. Northwestern, it depends on what version of Northwestern we see, right? Wisconsin, I think they're going to be much more improved this year. And then, like you said, you travel on the road to play at UCLA and at Maryland. That's going to be really tough, I think, for them. Even though maybe those opponents aren't, necessarily going to be really slotted to do very much. Still traveling on the road out to the West Coast isn't easy, and then turn around and doing it to the East Coast isn't always easy, right? So yeah, it'll be interesting. Then we talk about Nebraska. Again, we'll see what happens there. I think this schedule is one where it's easy on the surface, could be very difficult, in practicality to maneuver. Looking at the ceiling for them, I do think, like Chris said, 11-1. If their offense takes the steps forward they need to take, and they can take some pressure off that defense. Look, Kirk Ferentz is due. He is due for something, right? He needs to be able to compete and put himself in a position to make it to this playoff in the expanded format. Because I don't think that Iowa really has, and Kirk Ferentz, I should say, has a whole hell of a lot of more seasons left in the tank, especially after, his son got, let go last year. I think that we're kind of getting to the end of the Kirk Ferentz era in Iowa.